والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعد نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إلى علمنا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. Inshallah, we'll continue reading from the book known as Tahdheeb At-Tahdheeb by Abil Fadl Ali ibn Ahmad المعروف بابن حجر الأسقلاني أو أحمد بن علي رحمه الله تعالى. أبو الفضل أحمد بن علي بن محمود ولا محمد نعم أحمد بن علي بن محمد المعروف بابن حجر الأسقلاني رحمه الله تعالى, who died in the year 852 after the Hijrah. Abu al-Fadl Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Muhammad ibn أحمد ابن علي ابن أحمد ابن محمود وكذا ابن حجر الأسقلاني رحمه الله تعالى. أحمد ibn Ali ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 852 after the Hijrah. And as we talked about before the break, this book, it deals with the biographies of the individuals mentioned in the 6 books, Al-Kutub al-Sitta, Al-Bukhari wa Muslim wa Abi Dawud wa Tirmidhi wa Nasa'i wa Ibn Majah, as well as the secondary books written by those authors, i.e. the non-primary books of those authors. All of the individuals mentioned in those books, the validation or the qualifications of those individual narrators, from authenticity to inauthenticity. And we've reached the section, the first section in the book that deals with people named Ahmed. And we've reached the section that deals with the people known by Ahmad ibn Sa'eed. Their father's name is Sa'eed. So the author, he says, Kha Mim Dal Ta Sin. This next individual, his narrations can be found in Kha al-Bukhari, Muslim, Mim, Dal Abu Dawud, Ta Tirmidhi, Sin al-Nasa'i. Yani al-Khamsa. Those 5 books, to the exclusion of Ibn Majah being the 6th of them. His narrations aren't in Ibn Majah, but the rest of the 5, you can find this individual's narration in their books. Who is he? He is Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati. Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati, Abu Abdullah al-Marwazi al-Ashqar, Nazil Naysabur. He is Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati. Al-Ribat is with a kasra on the ra and a fatha on the ba, and at the end of it there is a ta with no dot. And it is an attributing to the area known as Al-Ribat, which is a place where the Muslims would, or where a person would tie his horse. And it became known for the Muslim front lines, right? The front lines of the battlefield. That area is known as Al-Ribat. Because they would tie their horses at those locations to protect the Muslim frontier, to protect the Muslim front lines. And so it is those areas where the soldiers would encamp and protect the front lines, the border lines of the Muslim lands, those who are face to face against the enemy, and they would protect the Muslims from behind them. So that area would be known as Ar-Ribat. Like Allah says in the Quran, وَمِن رِبَاطِ الْخَيْلِ تُرْهِبُونَ بِهِ عَدُوَ اللَّهِ. And with your tying up of your horses, you instill fear in the enemies of Allah. And Ar-Ribati was given this name, this nickname, Ar-Ribati, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim Ar-Ribati. He was given this nickname because he was one who was in charge of the soldiers in the Muslim front lines. And so this was something that was commonly known about him and famous about him. So he was given this nickname, Ar-Ribati. وَلَعَلَّهُ يَتَوَلَّى عِمَارَةُ الرِّبَاط. And because he might have been one of the people who was in charge of the front lines. Naam. So what is his name again? Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati. His kunya was Abu Abdullah al-Marwazi from Marshah, right? Oh, Marshah, right? From the area known as Mar. He was known as al-Marwazi, al-Ashqar, right? One who was of a darker complexion, who ended up taking up residence in Naysabur. Ahmed ibn Sa'id ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati, Abu Abdullah al-Marwazi al-Ashqar, who ended up taking up residence in Naysabur. His hadith could be found in all of the 6 books except Ibn Majah. From his teachers, he says, روى عن أحمد الزبيري عن أبي أحمد الزبيري وأبي داود الطيالسي والنضر بن شميل ووهب بن جرير بن حازم ويونس المؤدب وغيرهم. From his teachers, there was Abu Ahmed al-Zubairi and Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi, as well as An-Nadhr ibn Shumail and Wahab ibn Jarir ibn Hazim and Yunus al-Mu'addib and other than them. These were some of his teachers. As far as his students, he says, وَعَنْهُ الْجَمَاعَةِ سِوَى بِنَ مَاجَةَ وَبْنُ خُزَيْمَةَ وَالصَّرَّاجِ وَالْقَبَّانِ وَإِبْرَاهِيمَ بْنُ أَبِي طَالِبٍ وَجَمَاعَةً. From his students, there was the entirety of them, i.e. the whole group, all 6, except Ibn Majah, as well as Ibn Khuzaymah and As-Sarraj and Al-Qabbani and Ibrahim ibn Abi Talib and a large group besides them. So those were some of his students. He says, قال النسائي ثقة. An-Nasa'i said about this person that he was righteous and reliable, ثقة. وقال ابن خراش ثقة ثقة. Ibn Khirash, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said about him that he was extremely righteous and reliable. When you hear them repeating the term, then this is from the highest levels of praise. Thiqatun thiqah. So when they repeat it like this is from the highest levels of praise. قال الخطيب ورد بغداد في أيام أحمد وجالس بها العلماء وذاكرهم وكان ثقة فهما عالما فاضلا. Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, he said about this individual, Ahmed ibn Sa'id ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati, Abu Abdullah al-Ashqar, Nazil Naysabur. Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, he said about him that he came to Baghdad during the days of Imam Ahmed. He came to Baghdad during the life of Imam Ahmed, and he sat with its scholars, and he reviewed with them, meaning this was a custom to sit amongst the scholars and to exchange knowledge with them, right? To give and take the back and forth with the other scholars of that area. Al-Khatib, he goes on to say about him when he was somebody who was thiqah, righteous and reliable, fahima, who had a good understanding of the religion. Aliman, he was a scholar, fadilan, of nobility and high status. So this is some of what was said about this individual, Ahmed ibn Sa'id ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati, Abu Abdullah. Al-Qabbani, he said about him, قال القباني مات بعد سنة الرجفة سنة 43. Al-Qabbani, he said he died after the year of the earthquake in the year 43, i.e. the year 243. وقال غيره سنة 45. Others beside Al-Qabbani said that he actually died in the year 45, i.e. 245. وقيل مات في المحرم سنة 46 و200 بقومس. While others have said he actually died in the month of Al-Muharram in the year 246 in the city of Qumas. And Qumas, if I'm not mistaken, is in Iran. No, Qumas is let me bring it up on the map. It's a city in Iran, Qumas. It appears to be in northeastern Iran, right on the borders with Afghanistan, or very close to the border of Afghanistan, the city of Qummas. Now, so others say he died in the year 246 in the city of Qummas. Now, Ibn Hajar, he says, قلت هذا القول الأخير حكاه البخاري عن ابن أحمد وتبعه القراب وابن منده والكلاباذي وابن طاهر. This final statement, or this last statement that was mentioned, that he died in the year 246 in the month of Muharram in Qummas. This last statement that was mentioned has been reported by al-Bukhari on the authority of Ibn Ahmad, and he also followed him in this statement, al-Qarrab, as well as Ibn Mandah and al-Kalabadi and Ibn Tahir. Right, so these are some of the people that had this opinion that he died in the year 256. Ibn Hajar, he goes on to say, وَجَزَمَ صَاحِبُ الزَّهْرَةِ بِالَّذِي قَبْلَهُ وَنَسَبَهُ التَّنُّوخِ وَقَالَ يُقَالُ لَهُ الرِّبَاطِ. He said the person who wrote that book as Zahra, and let's do this because I keep forgetting to go back and do it. So let's do it now so we can have it done, and I won't have to keep saying I'll come back and do it some other time. Sahibu az-Zahra. He says, some of them say the author of it is not known. لم ينسبه لأحد ولعله لمحمد ibn Dawood al-Zahiri. Right, and it's not the same Ibn Dawood al-Zahiri who wrote the book in etiquette, which is also called az-Zahra, but it's another Muhammad ibn Dawood, even though some people don't know exactly who wrote it. كرجال الصحيحين الفضل محمد بن طاهر ومن قبله الحاكم ورجال البخاري لأبي النضر الكلاباذي ثم لأبي الوليد الباجي ورجال مسلم لأبي بكر بن منجوية ورجال الصحيحين وأبي داود والترمذي لبعض المغاربة سماه الزهرة وذكره عدة ما لكل منهما عند من أخرج له وأظنه اقتصر فيه على شيوخهم. Right, so some of the people say they don't know exactly who he is, and some of them say that he is Muhammad ibn Dawood al-Zahiri, but he shouldn't be confused with another individual. But he's a person who al-Maghlataya and Ibn Hajar, they constantly mention him in their books, and he compiled a book in which he talked about the teachers of Bukhari and Muslim and Abu Dawood and Tirmidhi in his book. So in any circumstance, he says that Sahib al-Zahra, he holds the view that was before the last view, i.e. Sahib al-Zahra, he holds the view that Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim died in the year 245. He holds the second opinion, that Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim, he died in the year 245. And At-Tanuhi, he attributes it to him, meaning Sahib al-Zahra, he attributes this view to At-Tanuhi, and he says it was also said about this person that his nickname was Ar-Ribati, or his way of identifying him was known as Ar-Ribati, as we've already mentioned. Ibn Hajar, he goes on to say, وأما القباني فإنه لم يقل في هذه اللفظة بعد سنة الرجفة فإنها وهم لأن سنة الرجفة كان سنة 45 فكأن الصواب قيل قبل سنة الرجفة أو سنة 6 لا 3. Here he comments on a statement that was made. If we remember, Al-Qabbani, what was transmitted by Al-Mizzi and before him, Al-Maqdisi, what was transmitted by them is that Al-Qabbani said that this individual died the year 243 after the earthquake, right? After a well-known earthquake that happened in that year. Ibn Hajar, he says, commenting on this, as far as the statement of Al-Qabbani, then it's known that he didn't say the words after the year of the earthquake, because this is a clear mistake. Because the year of the earthquake was the year of 245. And so what must have been accurate from the statement of Al-Qabbani was that he said before the year of the earthquake or after the year of the earthquake in the year 246, not in the year 243. And so this is just Ibn Hajar commenting on some of the errors that might have been in the previous books, correcting them. He says, قال أبو حاتم الرازي أدركته ولم أكتب عنه وكتب إلي بأحاديث وكان يتولى على الرباطات. Abu Hatim al-Razi, that famous scholar, he said that I reached his time period, but I didn't write anything down directly from him. And he, talking about Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim, wrote some hadith for me. He wrote me letters or some correspondence that had some hadith in them. And this is an issue in the science of hadith. What is the validity if somebody writes a hadith to you and sends it to you, known as munawala or mukataba, right? If somebody gives you a hadith and writes it down for you instead of you hearing it from them. And so Abu Hatim is saying, I never wrote anything directly from him, but he wrote to me several ahadith. And he was one who was in charge of the Muslim front lines. He was one who was in charge of the Muslim frontier, right? The soldiers and the administration of the Islamic frontier. He was the person, one of the people in charge of that. This individual, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati. Ibn Hajar, he says, وَقَالَ الْخَلِيلِيُّ فِي الْإِرْشَادِ ثِقَةٌ عَالِمٌ حَافِظٌ مُتْقِنٌ. Al-Khaliliyu, he said in his book Al-Irshad that this individual was thiqa, righteous and reliable. He was a well-known scholar who had memorized, and he was proficient in his narrations. Ibn Hajar, he says, وَقَالَ أَبُو عَلِيَّ الْحَافِظ كَانَ وَاللَّهِ مِنَ الْأَئِمَّةِ الْمُقْتَدَى بِهِمْ. Abu Ali al-Hafiz, he said about this individual that he was, and I swear by Allah, from the imams who others should follow his example. Talking about Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati. He says, قال Muhammad ibn Abd salam, and then there is a gap in the manuscript. And they say in the footnotes, like this, he was attributed to, he was given a lineage by the author, Muhammad ibn Abd salam. And Ibn Abd salam, he followed in this affiliation, al-Maghlataya. But indeed, this statement is actually from the statements of Muhammad ibn Ali al-Saffar, as is indicated by al-Khaliliyu in the context of his book Al-Irshad. And he also gave him an affiliation or an ancestry like this, a lineage like this. And this is the correct view. So the person who's actually making this statement is Muhammad ibn Ali al-Saffar, even though Ibn Hajar is saying that it is Muhammad ibn Abd salam. And this is something that happens. Like we see, Ibn Hajar just corrected al-Mizzi and corrected al-Maqdisi. And here are the people in the footnotes correcting Ibn Hajar, right? And likewise, al-Dhahabi corrected it as well in his book, Sirah Alam al-Nubala. The point is that this individual, whether it was Muhammad ibn Abd salam or Muhammad ibn Ali al-Saffar, what did they say about Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim? They said about him, لم أرى بعد إسحاق ibn Ibrahim مثله. He said, I've never seen anybody after Ishaq ibn Ibrahim similar to him, right? They said about this person that he was similar to Ishaq ibn Rahuya, right? The famous scholar, the friend of Imam Ahmad, Ishaq ibn Rahuya, or as some people call him, Ishaq ibn Rahaway. Muhammad ibn Abd salam or Muhammad ibn Ali al-Saffar, they said about him, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati, he said, I've never seen anybody after Ibrahim, Ishaq ibn Ibrahim similar to him. And this is from the scholars of Maru, because Ibn Rahuya was also from that area. Ibn Hajar, he says, وَفِي الزَّهْرَ روى عنه البخاري سبعة. In the book Az-Zahra, he mentions that Bukhari narrated 7 hadith from this individual. And he says in another place, وقال في موضع أخرى حدثنا أحمد غير منسوب فاحتمل أن يكون هو أو الدارمي. In another location of the book, Al-Bukhari, he says that Ahmed narrated to us. And when he says Ahmed here, he doesn't affiliate him to anyone. He doesn't attribute him to anyone. So it's possible that he can mean Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim, and it could also mean that he means Ahmad ad-Darimi. Yani Ahmad ad-Darimi. Now. And so that's the end of the biography of Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati, Abu Abdullah al-Ashqar, Nazil al-Naysabur. Right? Nazil al-Naysabur, thiqatun, thiqah. The next individual, he says, Dal. This person, his hadith can be found in the Sunan of Abi Dawood. And his name is Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Bishr ibn Ubaidillah al-Hamdani, Abu Ja'far al-Misri. Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Bishr ibn Ubaidillah al-Hamdani, Abu Ja'far al-Misri. Naam. He says that from his teachers, روى عن ابن وهب والشافعي وأصبغ بن الفرج وبشر بن بكر وغيرهم. Right, he narrated on Ibn Wahab, yani Abdullah ibn Wahab, the student of Imam Ahmed. The student of Imam Malik. Likewise, he narrated on Ash-Shafi'i. And he also narrated on Asbagh ibn al-Farj. And he narrated on Bishr ibn Bakr and other than them. These were from his teachers. Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Bishr ibn Ubaidillah al-Hamdani, Abu Ja'far al-Misri. He said it regarding his students. He said, روى عنه أبو داود وذكر صاحب النبل أن النسائي روى أيضا عنه والبجيري وابن أبي داود وفضلك الرازي وأبو الطيب الرسعني ومحمد بن الربيع بن سليمان وغيرهم. As far as his students, they say that Abu Dawood narrated on this individual. And it was also mentioned by the person who wrote An-Nabal. And as we mentioned before, An-Nabal is a book that mentions the biographies of the teachers of An-Nasa'i. An-Nabal is a book that mentions the biographies of the teachers of An-Nasa'i. The person who wrote that book, An-Nabal, he said that An-Nasa'i also narrated from this individual. From his students as well was Al-Bujairi and Abu Dawood's son, right? Abu Bakr Abdullah ibn Abi Dawood, as well as Fadlak al-Razi, another known scholar known as Fadlak al-Razi, and Abu Tayyib al-Ras'ani. Also from his students was Muhammad ibn Rabi' ibn Sulaiman, right? Rabi' ibn Sulaiman, the famous student of Ash-Shafi'i. His son Muhammad also was from the students of this individual, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Bishr ibn Ubaidillah al-Hamdani, Abu Ja'far al-Misri. So that's what relates to his students and his teachers. They say, قال النسائي رحمه الله تعالى ليس بالقوي ولو رجع عن حديث بكير بن الأشج في الغار لحدثت عنه. An-Nasa'i, he said about him that he wasn't all that strong. An-Nasa'i criticized him, saying he was not all that strong. And if he had only recanted the hadith of Bukair ibn al-Ashaj regarding the cave, I would have narrated from him. So An-Nasa'i is leaving him because he did not give up narrating this hadith about the cave that was reported by Bukair ibn al-Ashaj. And let's see if we can find it. Hadith al-Ghar. Riwayati ibn al-Ashaj. حديث خمس إذا ابتليتم بهن وأعوذ بالله أن تدركوهن من الأحاديث المشهورة جدا ولا يكاد يمر بك كتاب أو مقالة أو خطبة إلا تجده فيها. Okay, وأخرجه أبو نعيم. I'm trying to find the riwayah with Bukair ibn al-Ashaj. Let's type in here. Bukair. Oof. إنما تكلموا فيه وكذبوه لأن همزة الكناني قال إنه أدخل على أحمد بن سعيد الهمداني حديث بكير بن الأشج النافع عن ابن عمر حديث الغار. وقال النسائي لو رجع عنه. Okay, so what is the hadith? وأحمد okay وإنما تكلموا فيه وأحمد ابن محمد بن الحجاج بن رشدين وكذبه بعضهم ولم يسمع. Okay, he's not talking about the hadith though. He's talking about the person. Oh, duh. The hadith al-Ghar is the hadith about the three people trapped in the cave. The hadith about the three people trapped in the cave. الَّذِينَ تَوَسَّلُوا بِصَالِحِ أَعْمَالِهِمْ. Those who sought intercession with their righteous actions. The hadith of Ibn Umar. نعم ليس بالقوي ولو رجع عن حديث بكير بن الأشج في الغار لحدثت عنه. نعم نعم حديث الغار يعني الثلاثة الذين توسلوا بصالح أعمالهم. نعم. Oops, I meant to put that there. And so An-Nasa'i, he is criticizing him, saying he's not that strong. And if he had only recanted his narrating of the hadith of the cave that was reported by Bukair ibn al-Ashaj, I would have narrated from him. Meaning if he would have not narrated or taken back his narrating of this version of the hadith, and Nasa'i says, I would have narrated from him. Naam. They go on to say, وذكر عبد الغني ابن سعيد and حمزة الكناني أن أحمد بن محمد بن الحجاج بن رشدين هو أدخل على الحمداني حديث الغار. Abdul Ghani ibn Sa'eed mentions that on the about Hamza al-Kinani, that Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn al-Hajjaj ibn Rishdain, he is the one who introduced or put this hadith on Ahmad ibn Sa'eed al-Hamdani about the cave, right? So it wasn't Ahmad ibn Sa'eed's fault. It was another narrator, Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn al-Hajjaj ibn Rishdain, who input and entered al-Hamdani on this hadith. They say in the footnotes, I could have just looked there. In the footnotes, it says that the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar and the story of the three individuals who entered the cave, and then the rock was removed that had blocked them in the cave, after each of them made dua with their most righteous action that they had did. And Allah gave them an escape by way of that and uncovered the cave. And I have not found any source material that presents this hadith from the pathway of Bukair ibn al-Ashaj, except that it is mentioned in the history of Damascus, and it's been mentioned without a chain from the statements of Hamza al-Kinani, that Ahmad ibn Rishdain, he is the one who put Ahmad ibn Sa'eed al-Hamdani in the chain of the hadith of Bukair ibn al-Ashaj on Nafi on the authority of Ibn Umar regarding the hadith of the cave. And the hadith of Ibn Umar about the cave, it is reported by Bukhari and Muslim from other pathways besides Bukair ibn al-Ashaj. Like, what does all of this mean? And this is a good benefit here. When we talk about authentic and non-authentic hadith, sometimes we're not talking about the actual metin or the text of the hadith itself. We could be talking about just the chain. So the text could be authentic, like the hadith of the people of the cave. But the chain could be what's problematic. And so An-Nasa'i, he didn't like Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Bishr ibn Ubaidillah Abu Ja'far al-Misri because of how he narrated, in Nasa'i's opinion, on Bukair ibn al-Ashaj, this hadith that gets back to Ibn Umar about the people in the cave. And then Nasa'i is saying that if he would have only not narrated that hadith or taken it back and admitted he made a mistake, I would have narrated from him. But Al-Kinani, Hamza Al-Kinani, he is saying that in reality, it wasn't Ahmad ibn Sa'eed who narrated on Bukair ibn al-Ashaj, but instead it was Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn al-Hajjaj ibn Rishdain who said that Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Bishr is the one who narrated on Bukair. And Bukair was actually free. Ahmad ibn Sa'eed was actually free of that criticism. And so all of this is to show us that the criticism of Nasa'i that he made about this individual is a criticism that is out of place. And these are some important lessons, right? Lessons in one, the inauthenticity of something could not be about the text, but also just about the chain. Two, that the criticism of a scholar, we have to look into it. Even though Nasa'i was a major scholar, and some of them equate him to the level of Muslim, even with that, we have to look at his criticism of this individual. And then when we look at the criticism of a Nasa'i, we have other people that justify, or should we say, explain away the thing that was criticized by Nasa'i about this person. And so all of these are important lessons, and this is what is done. And this shows you the value of the people of the scholars of hadith, how detailed they were in documenting and collecting all of this information. Naam. So that's what was said so far about Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Bishr ibn Ubaidillah Abu Ja'far al-Misri. They go on to say, قال ابن يونس مات ليلة السبت لعشر خلون من رمضان سنة 53 و200. They say that Ibn Yunus said that he died on the night before Saturday, 10 days into the month of Ramadan. So he died 10 days into Ramadan in the year 253. So he died the 10th of Ramadan, or the 11th of Ramadan, actually, because 10 days had already passed. So the 11th of Ramadan in the year 253. Ibn Hajar, he says, قلت قال زكريا الساجي ثبت. So we saw the criticism that was levied by Nasa'i in its explanation. Here, Ibn Hajar, he adds, he says that As-Saji, Zakaria As-Saji, he said about this individual that he was thabt, that he was firm in his hadith. وقال العجلي ثقة. And Al-Ijli, right, that famous scholar of people, he said that he was reliable and righteous. He was thiqah. Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Bishr was thiqah. Ibn Hajar, he says, وقال أحمد بن صالح ما زلت أعرفه بالخير منذ عرفته. Ahmad ibn Salih, he said about this individual that I have always known him with goodness for as long as I've known him. I've never known anything about him other than good for as long as I've known him. And so these are three people attesting to the value of this individual. And now we have the explanation of An-Nasa'i's criticism. And even Nasa'i's criticism, if it were valid, it would be something that is in the small levels of criticism. And so we see that this person is somebody who's reliable and can be taken from. So if we see the hadith of this person in the Sunan of Abi Dawood, we know that his chain is reliable, inshallah, at least up to him. He says, وَذَكَرَهُ بِنُ حِبَّانِ فِي الثِّقَاتِ. وذكره النسائي في شيوخه الذين سمع منهم. He says that Ibn Hibban mentions him in the book of Al-Thiqat. Ibn Hibban has a book known as Al-Thiqat, the righteous and reliable people, where he mentions this individual, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed, ibn Bishr, ibn Ubaidullah, Abu Ja'far al-Misri. Also, we have An-Nasa'i mentioning him in the book of his teachers that he listened or that he learned from. Right? So even though Nasa'i criticized him early, he also included him in the book of his teachers that he heard from. Ibn Hajar, he says, وَعَلَّمَ لَهُ فِي الزَّهْرَ خَ دَال. As far as the person who wrote the book as Zahra, then he stated that his hadith could be found in Bukhari and Abi Dawood. And so whether that was a mistake from him or whether there was a version of Bukhari that might have had a hadith of this individual in it, Ibn Hajar, he mentioned in his intro to this person that his hadith could be found in Dawood or the Sunan of Abi Dawood. But the person who wrote the book as Zahra mentioned Bukhari and Abi Dawood. Now, in the footnotes, they say some other statements about this individual, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed, ibn Bishr, ibn Ubaidullah, Abu Ja'far al-Misri. They say about him, قال أبو علي الغساني الجياني في تسمية شيوخ أبي داود كان مقدما في الحديث فاضلا. Abu Ali al-Ghassani, he said about this individual that he was somebody who was advanced in hadith and very noble and prestigious. Now, so that's the second, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed, ibn Bishr, ibn Ubaidullah, Abu Ja'far al-Misri. The next narration or the next person that we have is, they say, Kha, Mim, Dal, Ta, Qaf. And if we look, we see that the only difference between this Ahmed and the first Ahmed, as far as in the books, is that the first Ahmed was also in Nasa'i. As far as this Ahmad ibn Sa'eed, then he's in all 6 of the books except An-Nasa'i. So the first one was in all 6 of the books except Ibn Majah, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim, Abu Abdullah al-Ribati. He was in all of the 6 books except Ibn Majah. And as far as this one, Ad-Darimi, who we indicated towards earlier, he was in all 6 of the books except An-Nasa'i. So he was in Bukhari and Muslim and Abu Dawood and Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah. And his name was, obviously, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhr. Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhr Ad-Darimi, who his kunya was also Abu Ja'far. His kunya was Abu Ja'far As-Sarkhasi, As-Sarkhasi, Thumma Naysaburi, right? He was somebody from Sarkhas, and Sarkhs or Sarkhas with a fetta on the sin and a sukun on the ra and a fetta on the khaf, and it's also said to have a fetta on the ra, right? Some people say Sarakhsi and some people say Sarkhasi. And the first one is more famous, is a famous city in Khurasan, right? In eastern Iran, western Afghanistan. That's the area known as Khurasan. It's a famous city there between the areas of Naysabur, the region of Naysabur, and the region of Marw, right? Marw or Merv being further to the north in Afghanistan, and Naysabur being in the south. So Sarakhs would be in the middle of that area. Now, so this individual, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhr, Abu Ja'far As-Sarkhasi, Thumma Naysaburi. He ended up moving to Naysabur. Saq al-Khatib nasabahu ila Darim. And al-Khatib, he brings his lineage, attributing him all the way back to the individual known as Darim. And Darim, you hear this name a lot, Ad-Darimi. So who was Darim? I want to say he was a Persian, Darim, or a Yemeni. I don't know, Darim. Yeah, Persian. Darim. No, that's not him. They don't mention it in the footnotes, so it's my job. I'll have to look it up later. But anyway, they say that Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, he lists his lineage all the way back to the individual known as Dadim. And Dadim is an Arabic word, but he brings his lineage all the way back to the individual known as Dadim. And Al-Khatib, he says about him, وَقَالَ كَانَ أَحَدُ الْمَذْكُورِينَ بِالْفِقْهِ وَمَعْرِفَةِ الْحَدِيثِ وَالْحِفْظِ لَهُ. Right, he was one of the people who was known and mentioned for his Islamic jurisprudence and his awareness of hadith and his memorization of them. So this individual, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhr Abu Ja'far Ad-Darimi and As-Sarakhsi thumma Naysaburi, he was a famous scholar who was well known. From his teachers was another Ibn Shumayl. So we see that he has the same teachers as, or some of the same teachers as the previous Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim, right? Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim, from his teachers as well was another Ibn Shumayl. صح ولا لا? Now, so they're from the same generation in the same time period with the same name and also the same locale, right? Because they both ended up moving to Naysabur. Right, so this is why it's important to differentiate between them, even though they were both reliable. They were both thiqah. And so we see that when they talked about in Bukhari how he narrates on Ahmed, it was possible that he is referring to Ahmed ibn Sa'id ibn Ibrahim, Abu Abdullah al-Ribati, or he could have been referring to Ahmed ibn Sa'id ibn Sakhr, Abu Ja'far al-Sarakhsi, al-Darimi. So from his teachers, there was another Ibn Shumayl and Abu Amir al-Aqadi and Ali ibn al-Husayn al-Marwazi and Uthman ibn Umar wa Abi Asim, yani al-Nabil, wa Yahya ibn Abi Bukair wa ghayrihim. Right, so those were from his teachers. As far as the people that narrated from him, his students, they say, Rawa anhu al-jama'a siwa an-Nasa'i. All six of them, i.e. all 6 books, scholars of the 6 books, narrated from this person except An-Nasa'i. Also from his students, there was Al-Fallas and Abu Musa, and the 2 of them were older than him. وَهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْهُ وَوَهَبْ ibn Jarir وَهُوَ مِنْ شُيُوخِهِ. Wahab ibn Jarir, and he was also from his teachers. If we go back to the first Ahmad ibn Sa'id ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati, we see that from his teachers, there was Wahab ibn Jarir, if I'm not mistaken. Ahmad ibn Sa'id, from his teachers were Wahab ibn Jarir ibn Hazm, right? So they had the same, right? You got to pay close attention. And this is something that's important to know when a teacher narrates on the student, because somebody might think that that isnad is flipped or changed, right? Because you'll say, well, Wahab ibn Jarir, he's from the generation that should have been his teachers. How is he narrating a hadith from Ahmad ibn Sa'id ibn Sakhr al-Darimi? And it's because even though he narrated from him, he was from his teachers. Likewise, Zakaria as-Sijzi and Abu Awana and Ibn Abi Dunya and Ibrahim ibn Abi Talib and Uthman ibn Khurrazad and a large group besides them. These were all from his students. They say, قال أحمد ما قدم علي خراسان خراساني أفقه بدنا منه. Imam Ahmad said about this individual that no person had come to me from Khurasan. There was no Khurasani individual who had ever came to me that was more knowledgeable about Islamic law in his body than this individual. Meaning the most competent of Islamic law as it relates to his actions and his body and the way that he took care of himself was this individual. And they mentioned in the footnotes, because this statement, faqihul badan, right? Somebody who has fiqh of the body. What does it mean? I.e., they say that كَأَنَّ بَدْنُهُ مَطْبُوعٌ عَلَى الْفِقْهِ. It's as if his body was made to exemplify Islamic law, right? The way he conducted himself, the way he displayed himself, it was as if you were looking at a book of Islamic law. That's what they say when somebody says that he was faqihul badin, or as Imam Ahmed said, I've never been introduced, or I've never met any person from Khorasan who was more competent physically of Islamic law than this individual, right? He exemplified Islam with his body. Now, they say وَعَظَّمَهُ Hajjaj ibn Sha'ir. Also, Hajjaj ibn Sha'ir extremely praised this person, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhr Abu Ja'far Ad-Darimi. They say وقال يحيى ibn Zakariya النيسابوري كان ثقة جليلا. Yahya ibn Zakariya al-Naysaburi, he said about this individual that he was thiqah, righteous and reliable, and extremely honorable, jalil, and high status. وقال أحمد ibn Muhammad ibn Sa'eed ibn عقدة أقدمه الطاهرية هراء وكان أحد حفاظ الحديث المتقن الثقة العالم بالحديث وبالرواء تولى القضاء سرخس ثم انصرف إلى نيسابور إلى أن مات بها سنة 53 و200. Ahmed ibn Muhammad ibn Sa'eed ibn Uqdah, he says that At-Tahiriyya brought him to the city known as Hara. And Hara is a city in, if I'm not mistaken, northern Afghanistan, slightly west of Merv, right? Hara, Afghanistan. It is, you could say it's, northern Afghanistan towards the western border, and it is, it's almost directly north of Zaranj. And remember, we mentioned that Abu Dawood was from the city known as Zaranj. So if you go north, if Zaranj is at the bottom of the country, then Hara is at the northern part of the country. And it's called now Harat with the ta. So Hara. He said that At-Tahiriyya, and At-Tahiriyya are a group of leaders and princes and umara, right, emirs, from the lineage of Al-Amir Tahir ibn al-Hasan ibn Mus'ab ibn Zurayq al-Khuza'i. And if I'm not mistaken, the lineage of our Sheikh, Muhammad ibn Hisham al-Tahiri, goes back to these people, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see if I can find that real quick. I remember going over the Sheikh's biography, Qabilat al-Tahiriyya. No. In any circumstance, these individuals, they were a leading family in Afghanistan of umara, like emirs and things like that, who were in charge of that area. And their lineage goes back to Tahir ibn al-Hussein ibn Mus'ab ibn Zurayq al-Khuza'i, right? And Khuza'a is a famous tribe of the Arab, Bani Khuza'a. But anyway, this individual says that the Tahiriyya family, they brought this individual, Ahmed ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhr Abu Ja'far Ad-Darimi, they brought him to the area of Hara. And he was one of the Hufadh of Hadith. He was one of the scholars, the high scholars of Hadith, who was extremely proficient, righteous, and reliable. And he was a scholar of Hadith as well as the narrators. And so they made him a judge of the area, the region known as Sarkhas or Sarakhs. And then later after that, he relocated to Naysabur until he died there in the city of Naysabur in the year 253. He died in the year 253. So he died after the other Ahmed ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim al-Hamdani, Abu Abdullah al-Hamdani al-Ashqar al-Ribati. No, Al-Hamdani was Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Bishr. Al-Ribati. Naam, Al-Ribati. Naam. نعم, they go on to say وقال ابن حبان كان ثقة ثبتا صاحب حديث يحفظ. Ibn Hibban, he said, or Ibn Hibban says about him that he was somebody who was thiqa, righteous and reliable, thabtan, extremely firm and strong in his hadith. He was a person of hadith, sahibu hadith, who used to memorize as well. So we see everybody has nothing but praise for this individual, Abu Ja'far, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhr as-Sarkhasi or as-Sarakhsi. نعم, they say وكتب إليه أحمد بن حنبل لأبي جعفر أكرمه الله من أحمد بن حنبل. Imam Ahmad once wrote correspondence to this individual. He once wrote a letter to this individual, and he began the letter by saying, to Abu Ja'far, may Allah treat him with nobility and dignity, right? Akramahullah, may Allah treat him generously, from Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Right? He said to Abu Ja'far, may Allah show him nobility, from Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Ibn Hajar, he comments on this person's biography saying, قلت ذكره أبو علي الجياني في شيوخ ابن الجارود أن النسائي روى عنه. Abu Ali al-Jayani, right? Abu Ali al-Ghassani al-Jayani, he mentions in the book known as the Teachers of Ibn al-Jarud. Ibn al-Jarud, Ali ibn al-Jarud, was another famous scholar of hadith. He mentions in the book where he talks about his teachers, he says that An-Nasa'i also narrated from this Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhr, Abu Ja'far ad-Darimi. Ibn Hajar, he goes on to say, وَبَقِيَّةُ كَلَامِ Ibn Hibban مات سنة 60 و200. Ibn Hibban, he mentions a different death date. He says, if you go on and continue the rest of the statement of Ibn Hibban, the one we mentioned earlier, that he was thiqa, thabt, a person of hadith who used to memorize, the conclusion of his statement was he died in the year 260. He died in the year 260, as opposed to 253, or before it or after it by a small amount. That's the conclusion of the statement of Ibn Hibban. Now, Ibn Hajar, he says, وَفَرَّقَ أَبُو عَلِي الْجَيَّانِ بَيْنَ الدَّارِمِ وَالسَّرْخَسِ فَوَهِمَ. That individual that we just mentioned, Abu Ali al-Jayani, he separated between the individuals known as Ahmad ibn Sa'eed al-Darimi and Ahmad ibn Sa'eed al-Sarkhasi. So he made them two different people. Ibn Hajar says, but this is a mistake from Abu Ali. This is a clear mistake from Abu Ali. So if you see Ahmad ibn Sa'eed al-Sarkhasi and Ahmad ibn Sa'eed al-Darimi, they're both the same people. Darimi being the tribe that he's attributed to, and Sarkhasi being the location that he was attributed to. He says, وفي الزهرة, in the book known as الزهرة, روى عنه البخاري 20 حديثا ومسلم 26 أو 26. In the book الزهرة, he mentions that Bukhari narrated 20 hadith from this person, and Muslim narrated 26 from this person. He says, وقال البخاري في مواضع حدثنا أحمد بن سعيد عن بشر بن عمر الزهراني وأن وهب بن جرير وعثمان بن عمر بن فارس فاحتمل أن يكون هذا أو الرباطي. He says that in Bukhari, he mentions in multiple places in his book the statement that Ahmad ibn Sa'eed narrated to us on the authority of Bishr ibn Umar al-Zahrani, as well as Wahab ibn Jarir, as well as Uthman ibn Umar ibn Faris. So he just says Ahmad ibn Sa'eed, and then he mentions these teachers of that individual. And so it's possible that this could be this Ahmad ibn Ibrahim, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhr. It could be him, or it could be al-Ribati. Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim al-Ribati. It could be either one, because he doesn't specify which one it is. He just says Ahmad ibn Sa'eed. And this is what is known as muhmal, when the person is undistinguishable by name. We can't recognize who's being talked about using just his name or his teachers or his location or generation. So that person is undistinguishable. He's unidentified. He is unqualified. Not qualified in being acceptable, but there hasn't been any qualifying marks to help us identify him. And so if one of them would have been weak, then that would cause us problems in the chain. But since Ad-Darimi and Ar-Ribati were both scholars of hadith, it doesn't make a difference which one it is, because they were both reliable. The same thing like when you say Hadathana Sufyan. Sufyan narrated to us, and you don't know if it's Ibn Uyayna or Athawri. Or if you say Hadathana Hammad, and you don't know if it's Ibn Salama or Ibn Zayd, right? Both of them are reliable, so it doesn't make a difference which one it is. And so that's another personality that is similar to them in this. Ahmad ibn Sa'eed, you have Ar-Ribati, and you also have Ad-Darimi. And then there's a third one, but that's only in the Sunan of Abi Dawood. So Abu Dawood has all three. And the third one is Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Bishr al-Hamdani, Abu Ja'far al-Misri. But he's from a slightly different location, so it's less confusing in that regard. We have 3-4 more of these biographies, but they're short, so we'll knock them out now so we can finish Ahmad ibn Sa'eed. The next one, he says Meme. So this person is only in Muslim. He is Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Yazid ibn Ibrahim at-Tustari. So we have an Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Yazid ibn Ibrahim at-Tustari. And Tustar is a city in Iran, if I'm not mistaken. بضم المثنى الفوقية الأولى وفتح الثانية بينهما سين مهملة ساكنة نسبة إلى تستر بلدة من كور الأهواز من بلاد خراسان. Now, Tustar is a city in Khurasan, in Al-Ahwaz, which is like central eastern Iran, or like central Iran going toward, right, that Khurasan area, right? Al-Ahwaz. So you have Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Yazid ibn Ibrahim at-Tustari. From his teachers, there was Rawh ibn Ubadah. And from his students, there was Muslim, right? Muslim is the only one who narrates on Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Yazid at-Tustari. They say, كذا في الكمال والصواب أحمد بن سعيد بن إبراهيم وهو الرباطي وقد تقدم. This is how his lineage is mentioned in the book known as Al-Kamal, the book where all of us took these other books from, the book by Al-Maqdisi. He mentioned this person's biography as Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Yazid ibn Ibrahim. But Ibn Hajar, he's saying that this is how it's mentioned in the book Al-Kamal. But what is accurate, what is correct, is that this person is actually Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim, who was a Ribati, and he's already been mentioned. So there is no fourth one so far. This fourth one is actually the same one that has been mentioned already. And this happens, right? Sometimes a person gets a name mistaken, or a lineage has a link in it that wasn't mentioned by some and is mentioned by others. But at the end of the day, we know that in Muslim, there are only so far 2 Ahmad ibn Sa'eds. There's Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim, and there's Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhr. And both of them are thiqah. The next thing he says is seen. So this person's biography is only in An-Nasa'i. He says Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Yaqub al-Kindi, Abu al-Abbas al-Himsi. His name is Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Yaqub, who was from the Kinda tribe. And his kunya is Abu al-Abbas, and he is from Hims in Sham, right? Hims, I think it's in Syria nowadays. Homs, I think they call it, right? Hims, what do they call it? Hims. Homs, Homs in English, but Hims, a famous city in Sham and Syria. From his teachers, he says, Rawa an Baqiyya. He narrated on Baqiyya, and I'm assuming here it's Baqiyya ibn Walid, as well as Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Himsi. He also narrated on Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Himsi. From his students, there was An-Nasa'i, as well as Sa'id ibn Amr al-Bardha'i, right? So these were from his students, An-Nasa'i and Sa'id ibn Amr al-Bardha'i, who was another famous scholar. They say, قال ابن أبي حاتم كتب إلي ببعض حديثه على يدي سعيد. He says, Ibn Abi Hatim said that this individual, i.e. Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Yaqub al-Kindi, Abu al-Abbas al-Himsi, he wrote to me some of his hadith, right? He wrote down some of his hadith and sent them to me. And the person who wrote them down for him was Sa'id. Yani al-Bardha'i, yani Ibn Sa'id. Sa'id ibn Amr al-Bardha'i, his student. Amr ibn Sa'id al-Bardha'i is the one who wrote the hadith down for him, right? Who wrote the hadith, who penned the hadith that he mailed off. And وقال النسائي لا بأس به. And Nasa'i said about this individual that there's no problem with him. لا بأس به. There's nothing wrong with him. Ibn Hajar, he says, قلت وذكره ابن حبان في الثقات وقال حدثنا عنه مكحول وغيره. Ibn Hajar, he says that this individual was also mentioned by Ibn Hibban in his book Al-Thiqat, and he said that Makhul narrated to us on his authority as well as others. Right, so this person, inshallah, is acceptable. Ahmad ibn Sa'id ibn Yaqub Abu al-Abbas al-Kindi al-Himsi. So this is the fourth Ahmad ibn Sa'id that we have in reality, even if it's the fifth one that has been mentioned up until now. The next one is somebody who's not in any of the 6 books, but he's being mentioned to distinguish him from those people. So there's another Ahmad ibn Sa'id who's not in any of the 6 books or their secondary books, but Ibn Hajar is mentioning him to distinguish him. Who is this person? He is Ahmad ibn Sa'id al-Harrani. Sawabuhu Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib al-Harrani. So he is known as Ahmad ibn Sa'id al-Harrani. But in reality, what's more accurate about his name is that it's Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib al-Harrani. Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib al-Harrani instead of Ahmad ibn Sa'id. Ibn Hajar, he says, وَوَقَعَ فِي بَعْضِ نُسِخِ تَا Ahmad ibn Shu'aib. You can find it in some of the prints, some of the manuscripts of Tirmidhi going by the name Ahmad ibn Shu'aib. So we have 3 versions: Ahmad ibn Sa'id, Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib, and Ahmad ibn Shu'aib. فَحَرَّفَهَا بَعْضُهُمْ Ahmad ibn Sa'id. And because of some of the prints mentioning it as Ahmad ibn Sa'id, meaning some of the handwritten manuscripts mentioning as Ahmad ibn Shu'aib, because of that, without saying Abi Shu'aib, other manuscripts made the mistake in saying Ahmad ibn Sa'id. And so he's giving us the history of how this mistake could have been made. So there's a person who's named Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib. And in some of the manuscripts, they forgot to write the word Abi Shu'aib. They just wrote Ahmad ibn Shu'aib. And then from the manuscripts that copied from that, right, they see Shu'aib and they make a mistake and they write Sa'id, right? Because they could both look similar. And like this, a person thought that there was an individual known as Ahmad ibn Sa'id al-Harrani. So he's not actually in any of the 6 books. But to distinguish that and to clarify that mistake, the reality of this person's name is Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib. And so Ibn Hajar, he says, so the mistake has arisen from here. But you can find that Tirmidhi, the person that he narrated on, was actually a Darimi on this individual. Meaning, أخرج الترمذي عن الدارمي عنه. So you have Ahmad ibn Sa'id ibn Sakhar al-Darimi narrating on this individual, Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib al-Harrani. And so like this, we could see how the mistake occurred. Maybe somebody's eyes slipped. They were looking ahead at or they were looking behind at the previous narrator and wrote the same name again. And this is all like part of the history of how, like, studying manuscripts and then knowing the subtle mistakes, right? By researching and by a vast awareness of this information, you can kind of look at something and say, well, you know what, this is a mistake. And this is what Ibn Hajar is saying here, that Ahmad ibn Sa'id al-Harrani is actually a mistake. His name was actually Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib al-Harrani. Ibn Hajar, he says about this individual, Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib al-Harran, he says, Sayati fi Ahmad ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Shu'aib. His biography will be mentioned when we get to the name Ahmad ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Shu'aib. So that person, his name isn't even actually Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib. His real name is Ahmad ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Shu'aib. But he was known by Ahmad ibn Shu'aib, who got misprinted to Ahmad ibn Shu'aib, who got misprinted to Ahmad ibn Sa'eed, who was the student of Ahmad ibn Abi Shu'aib, who was actually Ahmad ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Shu'aib, and his biography will be mentioned at that time. The last person that he mentions, he says Ahmad ibn Sa'eed al-Ashqar, right? Some of the books you'll see a narration or an affiliation like this, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed al-Ashqar, and that is al-Ribati, and we've already mentioned him. Right? If you see Ahmad ibn Sa'eed al-Ashqar, then that is al-Ribati, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim, Abi Abdullah al-Ribati al-Ashqar, Nazil al-Naysabur, Fiqh, inshallah. And like this, we finished everybody whose name was Ahmad ibn Sa'eed. So at the end of the day, all of the Ahmad ibn Sa'eeds, they were acceptable and reliable. Two of them are confusable, Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Ibrahim and Ahmad ibn Sa'eed ibn Sakhar. But their hadith can be found in Bukhari and Muslim, Dawood and Tirmidhi, the former being found also in Nasa'i, while the later being found also in Ibn Majah. And like this, we finished Ahmad ibn Sa'eed. So next time we'll pick up with Ahmad ibn Abi Safar and those after him like Ahmad ibn Sufyan, Ahmad ibn Sulaiman, and Ahmad ibn Sinan. نعم, and we'll start with Ahmad ibn Sinan inshallah. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وفيكم بارك الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.